are some things that you could predict that we predicted on the show. It was an exit for Bernie Sanders, and he announced that yesterday. He's dropping out of the presidential race, and he told Stephen Colbert what his next move is when it comes to Joe Biden. Take a look.
I hope to be able to work with Joe to move him in a more progressive direction. And I think Joe is a good politician. And he understands that in order to defeat the president, in order to defeat Trump, he's going to have to bring new people into his political world, and that he's going to have to listen to their needs. I will do everything that I can to make sure that Donald Trump is not reelected, because I believe Trump has been the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country.
Okay. So while that's not an endorsement, what do you think? I mean, what do you think he's waiting for, Megan?
Well, yeah, you're right. That wasn't exactly a swinging endorsement of Joe Biden, but I really didn't expect anything less. What's interesting about the timing of this is that it seems a little late. I think it would have probably been more prudent for him to drop out a little earlier. And before the Bernie bros just light me on fire, please calm down. I don't care. The Democratic base has completely rejected populism. I think there was a thought process by many of us in the media that maybe the socialist progressive wing of the party had finally taken over, and that maybe this was Bernie Sanders' chance to be the presidential nominee. But what this election has proven so far is that his crossover appeal and the crossover appeal of socialist Democrats has been overpromised and overhyped. It didn't ultimately pan out, specifically with African-American voters in the South and more moderates. I think the main question lingering right now is what I call the Susan Sarandon Bernie supporter. And if you remember in the last election, she infamously said she would rather vote for Trump than Hillary Clinton because it would bring on the revolution faster. And ultimately, 12% of Bernie Sanders supporters ultimately ended up voting for President Trump. And I think there's a chance in this election cycle you could see those kind of numbers again. And as we're all aware, 12% of supporters can make a big difference. So it'll be interesting to see if he comes out and campaigns hard for Joe Biden, and ultimately if these Bernie bros can make their way to the voting booth and pull the trigger for Joe Biden.
We were just talking about Bernie Sanders, who exited the presidential race yesterday. You think Bernie's making the right move here?
Well, yeah, he has to get out, but I think that his idea of holding on to some of the delegates is a good idea, because then he'll have some kind of influence on the Democratic platform. You know, here's just quickly, Bernie has basically been proven right on a lot of things now that we're in the middle of this pandemic. I mean, we have a need for universal health care. That's obvious right now. What kind of a country or an economy are we going to have if Americans are too sick to go to work and too poor to pay for health care? It's an outrage. And I was just reading that 25% of Republicans now say that they're more likely to support universal health care. So much for socialism is not going to work. This is a form of socialism to have a universal health care. I mean, check out the White House. They're sending checks all over the place, and they love to bail out, corporations. Well, now they're going to have to bail out small businesses and people. As we just saw, there are so many people in this country who don't have food. People should be donating money to food banks. That's basically where I'm coming from right now. It's outrageous that there are people in this country who don't have enough food. So Bernie Sanders has made his point loud and clear. So thank you, Bernie. And now I'm glad I named my dog after him again.
Okay. So will Bernie make Biden take another look at where he stands on some issues, you think, Sonny?
Yeah, I do. And I thought what was fascinating to me is that when you look at Joe Biden's ascent in this race, South Carolina was a make it or break it place for him. And I just learned that 46% of South Carolina's coronavirus deaths are African Americans. African Americans make up just 27% of the South Carolina population. And so Biden really has to listen to Bernie's proposal for Medicare for all, has to listen to Bernie's proposal for universal health care. It was something that I think so many people were against. So many people wanted to keep their health care. Yes, maybe you keep your health care, but health care should be a right. a right. And tying healthcare at this point to employment is a disaster. We see what has happened. And so I think, Bernie was way ahead of the curve here, and we have to rethink it. To Joy's point, we must rethink that, especially if you have 25% of Republicans being in favor of it. Biden has to remember that his base, African Americans and African Americans, women in particular, are the reason why he is in the position that he is in. And he has to, I think, reward that base and protect that base. And that base is dying from the coronavirus.
I think everybody should remember that this was also Hillary Clinton's thought years and years and years ago when she was trying to get health care for all. I'm just saying, I'm glad Bernie's put it out, but, it's an idea that's been going for a long time.
She really
starting
never
with
gets that credit.
Teddy Kennedy.
You're right, with Hillary care.
Yeah. And I just thought we should say that because I'm glad that Bernie is saying it, but he's not the first one to have said it.